All right, here we go. Episode 69 of Young and Naive. Finally, another English version. And who are my guests tonight?
My name is Sultan Qassemi. I'm a UAE-based writer and blogger.
And Thomas.
And me. Okay, I'm Thomas Wiegold, and I guess your viewers know me already. I appear regularly on Young and Naive, and I'm, well, the military guy for Tito to explain the stuff he doesn't understand.
Okay, thanks. The idea of the show should be hopefully known to some people that I play a character who doesn't really know what's going on. So, Sultan, I heard there's something going on in Egypt. Tell us about it. What's going on there?
Well, there was a small thing that took place 2.5 years ago.
What happened?
There was an uprising.
Finally, another English word. An uprising. How does an uprising happen?
Well, a lot of people went on the streets and said, we don't like our leader. You know, could be a president, could be a prime minister, could be a king. We don't like this person or he or she, and we want to see the end of her.
Okay.
So that's what happened, or him.
So they got rid of the pharaoh, or what was it?
They got rid of the guy who was there. He was a semi-pharaoh. He was there for about 30 years, and he looked like he was going to be there for another 30 years.
Okay, and they overthrew him, right?
Yeah, well, they kind of overthrew him. What happened was that the military overthrew him, with obviously the presence of the people. But
okay.
there was this military that came into the ground and they got rid of him.
Why would the military do that?
Because they felt that there was a lot of anger in the streets, and it was easier to direct the anger to the president as an individual rather than to the entire military. Okay,
Thomas, explain to us why you just told me recently that the German army can never do that. Why can they do that?
Well, the point is, who's controlling the army? That's always the question in every country. And I would claim, or it's a hope, that in Western democracies, there are more safeguards in place to have control over the army. The army is not as powerful as in other states. And I think, Sultan, tell me if I'm wrong, I think in Egypt, the military wields not only military power as such, but also kind of economic power.
May I answer the question, Tyler?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, it is said that the military controls between 30 to 40% of the Egyptian economy. This could be an exaggeration.
Wow.
It could be an exaggeration. However, even if they control a quarter of the economy, it just shows you that they are an economic force to be reckoned with. And I feel yes, and they produce everything from water bottles to pasta, even the pasta that people eat in Egypt, and water, and all sorts of food and detergent. It's all made by military factories and industry.
Why?
Why? Because they have about 500,000 conscripts, so they can afford to have labor, cheap labor, and the truth is they produce relatively in Egypt higher quality products. That's because they don't pay taxes. That's because they don't pay for the land. That's because they probably don't pay much for electricity. They can afford to satisfy their employees. And then their supermarkets are subsidized. And so the Egyptians can go and buy in subsidized supermarkets. And then this relationship with the military continues. So the regular Egyptian is happy that the military is providing them with cheaper goods.
Okay. Thomas, how much does the German army influence the economy?
Zero. Well,
zero?
Yes, except, when they buy goods, of course. They are a consumer, so they influence as any consumer. But if you compare it to major companies like car makers or so, they have much less economic influence.
Okay.
So that's not a point in Europe, not in Germany, not in Europe.
Okay.
The armed forces are not part of the economy.
Okay. So then, has this always been the case? Like, have they always been this dominant?
They have been this dominant since the 1952 coup, that some people refer to as a revolution. Basically,
Another coup.
Egypt, yes, Egypt has several coups, and today was
Oh,
another one we'll talk about later. But Egypt had some kind of monarchy that was installed by the Ottoman Empire. They were Albanians, but they were installed by the Ottoman Turks on the Egyptian Arab Africans.
okay.
So and they stayed there for about a century and a half until they were removed in 1952 by a movement known as the Free Officers Movement. And the king was exiled to Europe. And since then, the military has played a very strong role for about 60 years.
Okay. And why haven't they lost that control?
Because it became a military junta, it became a military regime when the military person, Abdel Nasser and the people with him, the Free Officers Movement, when they came to power, they made sure that Parliament was very friendly to them. They made sure that newspapers were very friendly to them. They made sure that there was no credible opposition, even though there was a couple of parties, but they made sure that the opposition was one of those benign oppositions that really doesn't oppose you much.
So, Thomas, it doesn't sound like a real democracy.
Well, of course it's not. I don't think so that anyone claims it is. Okay. But I would like to know one thing, Sultan. If we see situations like in Turkey, where the military sees itself as a guarantee of the state, of a functioning state, is that similarly in Egypt, that the military says, whoever rules, we are those who guarantee the state will work, will function?
How can they say that? Like, how can the army take that role?
Shall I answer?
Yeah, please.
Well, basically, Turkey has been an Turkey has been a military, semi-military state since the fall of the Ottoman Empire 80 years ago. 90 years ago, since 1923, I think. And so the military played a very important role until the last decade. A new government known as the AKP came to power, and they sidelined the military. In fact, a few years ago, they jailed a large number of army generals. So the military was very, very powerful in Turkey until a few years ago. Part of the process of the military losing power is the hope of Turkey of joining the European Union. And so there was some pressure from outside, but also the AKP was able to masterfully sideline the military. Now, the Egyptians, where we are today, they sidelined the military in August 2012, or so they believed, the government.
Why did they believe that?
Because the military came back and ousted the democratically elected leader today, just a few hours ago.
Let's talk about that in a minute. Let's get back to the ruling that has been going on for like 50, 60 years, you say?
Yes, for about 70, 80 years, in fact, in Turkey.
But what happened 2.5 years ago? That there must have something happened. That what happened? They got rid of Mubarak, right?
Yes, there was a president called Mubarak. He still alive. He's in jail now. He's in his 80s, and he was ruler from 1981 to 2011. So
wow.
So 30 years. Yes,
wow.
30 years. And people had enough of him. And the reason is that the economy kept collapsing. Unemployment rate is 12 and 13% officially, but it's much more. There are 2 million street children in Egypt. And then finally, that straw that broke the camel's back is that there was rumors that the president who was ousted, Mubarak, ousted in 2011, that he was trying to install his son to come after him. And Egypt had done away with the monarchy 60 years ago, and they didn't want to install a new person who can become a new monarch.
So, Thomas, was Mubarak, was he a friend of ours?
Well, who is ours and what means a friend?
The West?
The West had close relations with Mubarak. Of course, there were arms deliveries also from Germany. Yeah, sure. We sell to everyone, almost everyone. No, the point is, I think the West was mostly interested in a stable Egypt, in a stable Middle East, or in the hope of a stable Middle East. And then it's not really important from that point of view who's in power in that country. Which, of course...
okay.
Yeah, Sultan probably can explain much better. But from a Western point of view, well, we don't give a shit as long as it's a stable country.
Yes, Sultan, explain to us, what is a stable country? Like, if you know the Western thinking, can you explain to us what a stable country is?
Well, a stable. There's a lot of trouble. I don't know if you know, but in the Middle East, we go through some wars every now and then.
Really?
For the past,
I never keep track.
For the past 2,000 years, we've had a few instances here and there.
Oh.
However, since the 1970s and 80s, these wars have intensified in the Middle East. There were military coups, and then militancy started, terrorism started in the Middle East, and so some Western countries prefer to have stable Middle Eastern and Arab regimes that were at least not friendly, but at least they were able to provide the West with either the oil, the natural resources, and perhaps buy weapons from these countries. So as soon as you change the regime, you do not know if the regime that is changed is friendly. And this happened before in the Middle East many times. You've had a change in regime in Egypt. You had a monarchy that was close to the West, and then you had a military regime that was not close to the West. You had an Iranian monarchy that was close to the West, then you had a republic that wasn't close to the West. And so there are many other examples of this.
What about your country, where you are? Where you're from?
I come from a country in the Arabian Gulf called the United Arab Emirates. It is a monarchy. It's made of it's a monarchy federation. So it's a rare example. There's only one or two other countries in the world I can think of. Malaysia is one of them. That's a federation, but it's also a monarchy.
What does it mean?
That means that there are 7 emirates. So there's 7 little monarchies that came together and formed one country in 1971.
Okay. Thomas, any follow-up?
Yes, I think we should come back to Egypt.
Yeah.
I'm still wondering, Sultan, from your point of view, the military tries to give the impression in Egypt that they are executing the will of the people. On the other hand, just this people, 52% of them had voted for Morsi in the last elections. So is this just window dressing, or are they on the right track given the public outcry about the current government in Egypt?
In 2012, in June 2012, Morsi, the person who was ousted today, was democratically elected in Egypt, no doubt. He had, I think, just over 51% of the vote. A large part of that vote had come from civilian coalitions, including liberals, leftists, even Christians, and some revolutionaries who stood with him on the stage just a few days before the final election date, and he promised them to fulfill their demands, to appoint a minority vice president, including a Christian and including a non-Islamist. And so he, one after the other, his promises, and he had made many promises, he hadn't kept them. And so the Egyptians were frustrated. But then this is how politics are. You promise people things to get elected, you don't keep them. Everyone knows that, because these leadership, they don't know. I mean, we saw Obama promise to shut down Guantanamo Bay before he came to power, and then he forgot about it for 4 years. And then again, he remembered it 4 years later. So
how naive of us.
Exactly. But with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, they didn't just not fulfill their promises, which is fine as politicians, but their government was so incompetent that the economy was collapsing even faster and faster, and Egypt,
Can you give us a few examples why they were so stupid apparently?
they were so stupid. For example, just a few weeks ago, Egypt has the tourism industry collapsed in Egypt. Naturally, you had a revolution. People were a bit apprehensive about going to Egypt. However, instead of attracting and encouraging tourists to come, one of their huge mistakes just 2 3 weeks ago was appointing an individual who came from a group, a militant group, an ex-terrorist group known as Jama'a Islamiyya, to be the governor of Luxor. And Luxor is one of the most important and historic cities in the world. It goes back thousands of years. They say that there is, I don't know what percentage of world history buried under the ground there. Tourists flock from all over the world. And the even worse, Tylo and Thomas, there was an incident not too long ago, I think 1996, in which 52 tourists were killed by the very same militant group that the president appointed an individual from.
What?
And immediately, yes, and
What?
immediately, and immediately, tourists started canceling their packages. People went out on the streets, protested against him. He would not remove him. Finally,
They put a terrorist into power or something?
no, I shouldn't say a terrorist. He's
Okay.
an ex. He belongs to this ex-terrorist group, this ex-militant group. I wouldn't say that he was a
Okay.
terrorist, but he belongs. The ideology is from that group.
Okay.
But that group especially was implicated in that massacre. However, the president who was ousted today never even removed that individual. What happened is that individual himself had the decency to step down.
Okay, let's talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. We were talking about Mubarak. He was forced to step down. How did the Muslim Brotherhood get into power, and why did the army let them?
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is the oldest and the best politically organized party in the Middle East, in the
Wow.
Arab world.
Wow.
They were founded in 1928 under the monarchy, and they were their initial mandate was anti-imperialist, anti-British imperialism in Egypt, and so they were quite popular in that sense that Egyptians wanted to end the British occupation of Egypt. They also
The British were in Egypt? Wow.
Yes, the British had occupied Egypt for a while before they were kicked out in 1952, along with King Farouk.
Okay.
So they were there, they were organized, and then they put their hands together with the military junta, and it worked for the first 4 years. So 1952, 53, 54, 55, 56, from 52 to 56, the first 4 or 5 years, they were best buddies with the military. And then the military turned against them, and they've been underground for decades until they were elected last year.
Just like today? Is the same going to happen this time?
What do you mean?
Like you say, they were best friends with the military, then the military ousted them, and then they're going to go underground.
They never learn their lesson. So when they were running for elections, they promised people, because Egyptians were quite unhappy with the military that caused deaths of many people, including the massacre of Maspero and several other incidents that people had died in under the military regime in Egypt, that lasted from February 2011 until June 2012. So in that 1.5 years, there was a military regime. The Muslim Brotherhood then cozied up to the military regime. They were praising it. The president kept visiting. And even yesterday, the president gave a big speech in which he wouldn't even criticize the military. He would criticize the opposition, and it was ultimately the military that ousted him today.
Okay.
So, may I, Sultan, now I'm wondering, we had this cooperation of the Muslim Brotherhood and the military, which led to the ousting of Mubarak. We had some certain cooperation. We had an election where more than half of the population voted for the Muslim Brotherhood, and now the military is ousting them. Is a large portion of the population still on their side, or don't we know? Or what does this mean for the followers of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt today or tonight?
Oh, this is a very, very good question. Now, it's a very uncertain time. These individuals, remember, they were voted by over 10 million people had voted for them. But that does not mean that their entire support base is 10 million. The issue is, and this is Egypt, so it is fascinatingly complicated. The Muslim Brotherhood individual, Morsi, who was ousted today, was running head-to-head with a former Mubarak prime minister. And so
Wow.
Egyptians who just ousted Mubarak and didn't want to see him again, they didn't want to vote his last prime minister in,
Right.
went and voted kind of, you know, they swallowed the bitter pill and voted for Morsi. So they might have, the Morsi obviously, or the Brotherhood, have a very strong base behind them, but it could go into the several hundreds of thousands. Definitely not into the 10 million, because had his support base been 10 million people who voted for him, then you would have had 10 million people in the street in the last 3-4 days.
No. Well, maybe he fucked them up so bad that they didn't want to join them.
I love that we can use such language.
Of course, of course.
So yes, well, Morsi and the Brotherhood alienated the other political parties. Even the Salafis, who are the Orthodox Islamists, even the Salafis stood by watching the Brotherhood fall and didn't, you know, they in fact, the only thing they did was propose an initiative where there would be early elections. So they just wanted to get rid of the Brotherhood. So everybody had turned their back against them. The only two political parties that stayed with the Brotherhood until the very end were a party I called Brotherhood Light, known as Al-Wasat, which is a fringe party of the Brotherhood, and the Jama'a Islamiyya, the people who remember from the Luxor governor, so his party, they stayed with them. Otherwise, everyone else was against them ultimately.
So is this basically like 2.5 years ago, after Mubarak's ousting? Is it almost the same situation? There's not a clear way to go forward. Constitution is put out of place currently. The military has the final say. Is this similar?
In fact, you know, today, ironically, the roadmap today is much clearer than it was in 2011. 2011, what happened was the military brought in the vice president, Omar Suleiman, who read a statement saying that Mubarak, the former dictator, has stepped down. And that was it. No one knew what's going to happen. No one knew who would be the prime minister. Today, ironically, even though you had a legitimate president who was ousted, you have a much clearer roadmap because the military proposed yesterday and leaked to the news agencies that we will have the Supreme Constitutional Court head to become the new the interim president, that we will have a leadership council, that we are going to change the constitution that was written by the Islamists. It's a much clearer roadmap than the roadmap of 2011.
Let me ask you, Sultan. It might be a much clearer roadmap, but on the other hand, it's the roadmap given by the military. So is the military a non-partisan caretaker here? Probably, we talked about this in the beginning, they have economic interests. They have interests in where this all goes. So will they use their power to have influence on what will happen in the political process?
Or to ask differently, is the military the parents of Egypt, of all Egyptians? Like they have the final say no matter what?
They're definitely the most powerful force in Egypt today. The Brotherhood thought for a minute that they were more powerful when they ousted the former military leader in August 2012, and for a few months they really believed that they were the most powerful force in the country, but they had alienated so many people that the military was encouraged to get rid of them. And keep in mind, going back, Tilo, to your initial question, how much of the economy does the military control? The military controls perhaps a quarter, 25% plus, at least, of the Egyptian economy. And so as the economy continued to collapse under this regime, the military started losing more and more, and they saw their own interests being affected. So it's not totally altruistic here, by the way.
Yes, but are they non-partisan? Will they have their own agenda, or will they just say, we hand this over to the political process, and now it's due to the political parties to go ahead?
They are definitely not. They're definitely partisan. They are definitely not neutral. The military would rather not see an Islamist government. The military has battled Islamists for decades.
Why?
Initially under Abdel Nasser, they had jailed and executed and exiled Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamists from the 1950s and 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. For 5-6 decades, the military were either chasing the Islamists out, arresting them along with the military police and the regular police. And so overnight, you had them going from chasing these Islamists to actually saluting them and following orders from them. So it was a very kind of unnatural feeling for them. I feel they were very disoriented from it.
So you say they're not neutral as in they're anti-Islamist, or are they pro-secular forces? What does it mean?
No doubt the military is secular. They're Muslim, a majority Muslim and minority Christian, but they are a very secular force. The military and the police are not used to taking orders from the Islamists. The Islamists continue to make them uncomfortable.
Thomas.
No, as we are looking how this might evolve and will go on, you mentioned it's not 10 million supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, but at least a few 100,000 or maybe a few millions maybe. Is there the fear, or do we have to fear that there might be not only a political process but violence? Because those who have been ousted from power, not only Morsi as a person, but a whole movement has been ousted from power. Will they retaliate? Will they try to take vengeance and try to take influence?
Excuse me, that'd be my next question. What did Morsi say? Did he just say, okay, you want me out? Okay, bye? Or did he refuse?
Yesterday he gave a speech in which he mentioned the word "I am the legitimate president" over 70 times. So some people say 74, 78 times. So he said in 45 minutes, he mentioned it 70 times, which is almost once every 30 seconds or 45 seconds. And so he, rather than giving concessions and saying, I will form a new cabinet, I will appoint a neutral prime minister rather than a Brotherhood stooge, who's probably the most hated prime minister in Egyptian history today. He went and he continued his defiance. And today, Taylor and Thomas, he came out with this strange video that was recorded just before he was ousted, I believe, or maybe just after he was ousted, in which he said, I am the legitimate president. And he kept talking in the present tense, saying, I am the legitimate leader of Egypt, and I would prefer to have dialogue. But he is... I don't know, he's completely delusional. And I feel the ironic thing, Tilo, is Morsi is an eloquent speaker. Morsi is an educated leader. He's a PhD holder. The guy speaks fantastic Arabic, probably the best Arabic of any leader in the Arab world. The guy is definitely educated. His only problem is his own friends were his best friends were his worst enemies.
Why?
That the Brotherhood smothered him. They wouldn't let him be a president for Egyptians. They forced him into appointing advisors who were Brotherhood, governors who were Brotherhood, ministers who were Brotherhood, ambassadors who were Brotherhood. Endless stream of Brotherhood appointments, reneging on their promises one after the other. It was a disaster. Egypt was sinking deeper into hell every day. These Brotherhood people were in power.
So we take away it's probably a good thing that they're out, although it was still a military coup.
Not necessarily. It's a good thing that they're out, unless.
No. Oh, not.
Yeah. Oh no,
Why
no,
not?
not necessarily it's a good thing there are. Well, initial euphoria, people, including myself, are very happy to get rid of them, to see their backsides. However, there's been some worrying developments over the last couple of hours. You had media stations, including Al Jazeera, and I predicted this in a tweet before yesterday, that would be shut down. Looks like Al Jazeera has a ticker saying that the security forces came and shut down their channel in Egypt. Some journalists were arrested, and some Islamist channels were shut down. Wow. And they were shut down because they're accused of inciting violence and sectarianism. However, my personal opinion is this should be decided in a process rather than ad hoc, because who is the judge of this? Who's the judge of this process? That you are inciting sectarianism. I don't like it. I'm personally a secular liberal. However, the Islamists must not be driven underground, and that's what we have to be very careful of. The Islamists must be, especially in Egypt, they must be given a platform. They must be partners with the new Egyptian government. They must be given ministerial posts. They must be given ambassadorial posts. They must be given governor posts. You should not exclude them as they had excluded everyone else. That's the mistake.
But aren't they going to be super mad about the whole thing today?
Oh, they're very mad. In fact, over the past couple of hours, there's been news that came out of Egypt. 4 had died in clashes between opponents and supporters of the former president in Marsa Matruh. You had clashes in other towns. You had ransacking, and you had, I think, 1 or 2 deaths outside that area. So it's quite Jama'a Islamiyya ransacked stores in Qina, and there were gunshots and clashes in Alexandria. That's literally a couple of hours after the statement.
So I come back to the question which Tilo tried to down. Do we have to expect more violence in the coming days? Will there be an uprising or whatever of the supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood after what happened?
Hopefully not. However, Morsi's statement, the one that he recorded on a mobile phone, he had said, I'm the legitimate president, and he did not call on his supporters not to go to the street and say, I will pursue legitimate means to regain my presidency, which he probably has the right to do. But he kept it very open, and the incitement has continued. And so it's very worrying. The army had deployed along eastern Cairo, which is the most populated area, and Alexandria and other parts of Egypt. And so the army and the military police might be able to stop some violence, but I believe that it could get out of hand, especially because it's not just the Brotherhood, who are generally more politically savvy, but it's also the Jama'a Islamiyya, the Jama'a who is more militant, who are probably trained, who have weapons. And remember, Tilo and Thomas, Egypt has had, there have been reports that a large amount of weapons have been smuggled from Libya. And we all know what happened in Libya in 2011. A lot of these weapons apparently found their way through the huge and porous border with Egypt.
Wow. Thomas,
that sounds, excuse me, Sultan, this sounds a little bit like a civil war might be a bad option, but still an option.
I don't believe that there will be civil war in Egypt. In Egypt, you have a very strong military, 500,000 strong. You have 500,000 reserve. You have 500,000 police. So you have 1.5 million officers that you can call overnight almost that can preserve security. And Egyptians are also, I think they would not descend into this kind of civil war. At least this is my own reading. Of course, we saw what happened in Syria. Had you asked me, I would have told you the Syrians are the same. However, I hope that this time I am right.
Thomas, explain to us how the West had thought of Morsi in the last 2 years. How have we treated him, and how should the West treat the military coup now?
Well, that's of course a difficult point. With Morsi, the West has treated him with caution. he wasn't as close as an ally as Mubarak had been before for a long time. So
because he was an Islamist?
No, not necessarily, because I think it was still evolving. They still had no real reading of him and of the whole government. So they were not quite sure, let's say, is he on our side? What comes now is a problem because, to make it clear, it was a simple example. The US has by law no right to support countries where the legal government has been overthrown by a coup d'etat. We've seen this in Mali. So the US, when France intervened in Mali, the US were not able to, officially, they were not able to support this because they had no right to do anything there because the government had been overthrown.
So they could just say it wasn't a military coup, just pretend.
Everybody says it is a military coup. It's quite obvious. So it will still be to be seen how Western governments will react to this, and probably, and that's
how should they react?
Well, I think at the moment everybody has to wait how this sorts out. It's just too early to have an idea what will come out of it. Who will emerge as a legitimate government in this situation?
Sultan, last question before we come to some questions from our audience. How do you see this whole democracy movement how do you think it's going to go on, and how do you think is there a way to get rid of the military? Like the power of the military anytime soon?
I hope so. In fact, how do you say, the realization, I think this is the French word, the realization of the events of today were much better handled than 2011. What the military, the defense minister and the head of the military said when he took to the podium, he was surrounded, and this is in contrast to 2011, he was surrounded by the Coptic Pope, the Sheikh of Al-Azhar, the oldest Islamic institution in Egypt, other Islamists, women, so people from various... There were lots of women around him who spoke as well, young leaders, cultural leaders, religious leaders, political leaders. So they were all surrounding him. So it looked like it was the entire spectrum of Egypt was represented. And this is something that was missing from the Brotherhood government. And so if it continues this way, if it continues to be representative, and they include the Islamists, they have to include the Salafis and the Brotherhood, or else it will not work. But if they represent everybody, it will work. This is what I think.
Thomas, do you have something else? Otherwise, we go to the questions.
Let's go to the questions from the audience.
Okay. First, from Facebook, Patrick Müller. They're probably all German, Sultan. So he asked, do you think it's possible to establish a real democracy in Egypt, or is the power of the military dominating, like quick and dirty? We had it before.
I believe it's possible.
Cool. Marco asked, is there a potential and realistic danger that the military will continue to lay off presidents, perhaps even willfully, not due to people's protests?
Can you say the question again? Sorry.
Like, is the military able to overthrow any president in the future, even when the people are not in favor of it?
I think when the people are not in favor, it will be much tougher. I think they can, but ultimately, if the president is representative, if the president includes all different factions of society, the Copts, Christians, I mean, the Islamists, the liberals, the leftists, all sorts of people around him or her, it's going to be much more difficult to oust that president than it is this person.
So it always needs to be a popular putsch.
I think, yes, the putsch has to be popular for it to succeed from the military side.
Daniel, my friend Daniel asked, why should he care, he's German, why should he in Germany care about all this? What do you think?
Oh, Egypt is the number one, is the biggest, the most populous Arab state, has 85 million people. Egypt is the cultural center of the Arab world. All the media, the music, the TV, the film, even the religion, everything's invented in Egypt and exported around the region.
Islam was invented in Egypt?
No. Islam came from Mecca in present-day Saudi Arabia. But
Okay.
the oldest Islamist institution is in Egypt. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Alexander asks, what media outlets would you recommend to follow the developments after the breaking news part is over?
Well, I would recommend that you follow different news outlets. This is for Egypt, Tyler, right?
Yes.
Yes, for Egypt, I would recommend a new website that launched just 2 days ago called Mada Masr, and maybe I'll email you the links and you can post them.
Yes.
Mada Masr, Tahrir Square. There's Egypt Independent. There's Jadaliya. There's a bunch of websites. I think, and most of them are from Egypt, and they do a great job. Meydan Masr, so many.
They should not be in Arabic because.
They're all in English. They're all in English.
Can you give us a tip how to differentiate, especially when it comes to propaganda? I mean, just because we live in the West and read English tweets or English news doesn't mean it's the right kind of news or the truthful news. Do you have any way of letting us know how to spot the bullshit?
I think that individuals should read from both sides. I think that it's healthy for you to read from the leftists and the people on the right, just to get a clearer picture. So, and I feel that people are mature enough that they will make their own decision. However, these websites that I recommended, that I will email you in a link, they represent to a large degree varying opinions. Okay. Even Al Jazeera English is a great has a great opinion page.
Although they didn't do that good today, right?
No.
I checked different live streams, and yeah. Al Jazeera was the worst, I think.
Why would they do that? So
Al Jazeera is known to be the mouthpiece of the Brotherhood. They are the most sympathetic. Their reporters, and some of them are fantastic reporters, but their reporters are known to be the most sympathetic. I mean, they just completely threw out journalistic how do you say standards when it comes to the Brotherhood, and they just repeat what they say and defend them. I wrote several articles on this issue, and this is because the government that funds Al Jazeera is very close to the Brotherhood, and boy, did they bet on the losing horse.
And we are talking about Al Jazeera also English, or is it Al Jazeera Arabic?
No. In general, the English channel is much better, although the English channel has a couple of journalists who should move to the Arabic channel. But however, the English version is fantastic, and the Arabic channel has some great journalists. However, the policy of the channel is completely biased to the Brotherhood, and you could see their entire feed today is very, very pro-Brotherhood.
Sounds like some German media outlets. Don't you think, Thomas?
No. Well, I won't comment on that. I'll tell you later.
Sensa asks, what will happen to the Gaza border closure and siege now that the military is back?
That's a great question. Actually, just a few days ago, the Americans had taken permission from the Egyptian military to deploy a number of troops in case things get out of hand in Egypt. Also, the Brotherhood made sure that they keep the Israeli border under very tight control. In fact, the Muslim Brotherhood has been even a better friend to Israel than the former military regime. What the brother, yes, quite ironic if you think about it. What they did was that they flooded. They literally put shit in all the tunnels. You know, because there are these tunnels that go from the Gaza Strip to the Egyptian side, and the Brotherhood flooded the government in Egypt flooded the entire tunnels, everything they can find, so that they would open the border, and thereby they did a huge service to Israel. So Israel was quite happy with the Brotherhood, and now the Israelis are happy because they have their old friends back in the military.
Thomas, does that sound to you like any other decade in the Middle East?
No, not really. I think things like this have repeated itself over the last decades, but no, the situation is fluent all the time, and we'll have to see what comes out of it. And hopefully, as Sultan said, there will be no more, or will be no violence, or just on this minor scale as so far. And I hope that this will calm down pretty soon.
Did Morsi have any role in the Syrian conflict, Sultan?
Oh, this is a great question, Tilo. Just a few weeks ago, what happened was Morsi wanted to, show a little bit of macho-ness, whatever you want to call it, and he conveyed this huge conference or whatever, like this forum that was on the surface to support the Syrian uprising. But what he did was that he wanted to strut his feathers like a peacock, and then he came out and he made this crazy speech. Also, the speeches were full of sectarianism and hatred. But he made this crazy speech in which he said the Egypt, including its president, its people, and its army, stand with the rights of the Syrians. And so the military were like, say what? What are you talking about? Why are you volunteering us? And so the next day, the military who was pissed off came out with a statement, and they said the Egyptian military will not get involved in foreign whatever wars and battles, and the Egyptian military's role is only to preserve the Egyptian soil and within the Egyptian borders. So that's what he said. And so that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The military put a big cross on Morsi just after that day. Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Final questions from Twitter. Roland asks, does Sultan know anything about the new interim leader appointed by the military, Adli Mansour?
Yes, actually we do know. First of all, he's the head of the Supreme Constitutional Court. We know that he was just appointed 2 days ago. He's married. He has 2 daughters. He was born in 1945, and he seems to be a consensus figure. He was born in 1945 in December 23rd. He is the 6th president of Egypt.
Sounds like Jesus.
Actually, he has 1 son and 2 daughters. His name is Adli Mansour, and he is the head of the Supreme Constitutional Court.
Does he have any political affiliation, as far as we know?
No, not that I know of. I haven't gone that deep into it.
Why would they go for the Supreme Court guy?
Because the idea is that the Supreme Court judge is a neutral figure, a person who has objectivity, a person that is credible, a person that is apolitical, and that's why they wanted to. That's why they appoint him. Plus, it is actually in the Constitution of Egypt that should the position of the president be vacated, then the person that will fill it is the head of the Supreme Constitutional Court. And this is not just the only country in the world. Many other countries have that provision.
Okay. Is it true for Germany, Thomas?
No.
With the exception to the rule?
No, not necessarily. It's a little bit more complicated because the head of state is not the head of government, so we have a different construction here.
Another question from Roland. Sultan, if the army will use increased violence from the Muslim Brotherhood and / Gamma Islamia as a pretext for a crackdown on democracy?
I mean, hopefully not. I think right now the onus is on people like Al-Barad'i, on the Sheikh of Al-Azhar, on the Coptic Pope, on all these people who stood up and said we want to build an inclusive government and an inclusive society. They're the ones who should stand up and say that we will not take a crackdown on these Islamists. And this is not because I'm pro-Islamist, but this is because cracking down on them will drive them underground. And we saw what happened when you drove them underground in the past decades.
That's what I'm going to take away from this. That it's important that Islamists play a part in the new government.
Yes,
right?
they have to be given their fair share. They have to be represented, and obviously one day, if there are free and fair elections, they should be also given their chance to come back to power.
Zaya asked from Canada, what will happen to the Sharia constitution?
Oh, that's gone. That's finished. Cancelled today. A new constitution.
Explain to us. What's the Sharia constitution? I've never heard of that.
Sharia is Islamic law.
What's Islamic law?
Islamic law is the law that the Prophet, the law that's taken from the Quran, and the law that's taken from the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. So you combine this and his teachings. You combine them together, and you come up with Islamic law known as Sharia. And the Muslim Brotherhood they introduced a constitution that was heavily influenced by Sharia. They did that through the parliament that they heavily controlled. And this is a bit complicated. I can explain to you why they control the parliament, but ultimately that constitution has been flushed down the toilet today.
Okay. Julian wants to know, with the Brotherhood and Morsi out, Erdogan damaged, what are the reverberations for political Islam in the region?
Great question. Erdogan was their biggest supporter, and obviously Erdogan had his earthquake in the end of May and early June. His legitimacy is largely shaken. But interestingly,
so Erdogan poop his pants tonight?
I don't know if he poops his pants. He's the stronger party. However, he just lost his biggest ally in the Arab world. So today Erdogan has lost his biggest ally, and you're not just talking about any ally. You're talking about the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood International Organization. So the Muslim brothers in the UAE, in Kuwait, in Saudi, in Bahrain, in Jordan, in Syria, in Palestine, in Tunis, in Libya, in Morocco, in Sudan, in Algeria, all these countries, they all listen and they all adhere to the teachings of the Muslim Brotherhood Supreme Guide. He's like the Ayatollah. He is and I actually met him, believe it or not. And I'm I think one of the few people who met him from the Gulf. And he is a 74-year-old individual, and then so whatever he says, they follow. So losing Egypt is like cutting off the head of whatever that animal. It won't survive. The Muslim Brotherhood will I think it's very difficult for it to survive beyond today.
There's another question from Twitter. What does Sultan Al-Qassemi think about Hassan Shetata, a Shia scholar, his death, and should Morsi be sentenced as he let them?
Oh, Hassan Shahata, yes. There was
about him.
Well, Hassan Shahata is one of the minority Shia adherents in Egypt. So Egypt has an unknown number of Shia. Some people say it's 1%, but when you say 1% in a country of 80 million, you're still talking of 800,000 people. So a few weeks ago, there was this public lynching in which Hassan Shahata and I think 3 other people were tied, and then they were dragged down the street with people jumping on them. And this happened under the watch of the Brotherhood. There were arrests made, but this happened, Tilo, you remember the Syrian support conference I mentioned? This happened immediately after that sectarian Syrian support, and there's nothing to do with the Syrians. This is to do with the bigoted Islamists in Egypt, in which they were calling the Shia infidels and out of religion and enemies, and using all sorts of bad language against them. And so the next day, some people were so charged up as soon as they heard that there was a Shia in the neighborhood, and he was a known figure because he was a spokesman for the Shia. He was an activist. So they killed him and 3 others under the watch of the Brotherhood, and this made a lot of people uncomfortable in the region, especially at a time today where you have sectarian wars in Iraq and in Syria, and tension in Lebanon and Bahrain and elsewhere.
Thomas, can you tell us real quick what's the difference between Shiite and Sunnis?
Yeah, Sultan can tell that much better than I could.
Well, you're the German guy. Tell us.
I won't even try while he's listening. Sultan.
Sultan, is it like Catholics and Protestants?
Yeah, more or less. There was a split that happened a few years after the Prophet died, and then we never heard the end of it. In the end, you worship the same God. You know, it's like 99.9% the same, but people love, you know, hanging on to these 0.1% differences. And it's very much like Protestant and Catholics in Ireland, but multiplied by 1.5 billion.
Wow. Well, that were all the questions from the community. Thanks, Sultan, for explaining to us what's going on in Egypt. Thomas, did we forget anything? Anything important?
No, I think we have to keep an eye on that, and hopefully we'll see tomorrow in a few days what the likely outcome will be. And so also from my side, thank you very much, Sultan. That helped a lot in understanding what's going on.
Sultan, do we need to talk to each other again? Is there anything else going wrong in the Middle East?
No, everything's fine. There's no problem.
Cool.
Great.
All right. Let me cut off the live feed, and then we can talk afterwards. Hold on.